So today I was going to show you some of the required equipment for tree climbing. I'll start with this old clip that's really not legal anymore. This old clip didn't have a double locking mechanism on it, and so that means like really nowadays it's something that you really couldn't use. The clips nowadays, a lot of them will come with a wider ring, so you'll be able to put the rope in there a little bit easier, and they have a double locking mechanism. So you put a pressure on this and then you can open it up, and if you don't, it won't open. So that's the clips that are good for nowadays. Also carabiners. Carabiners nowadays, it has a couple of motions. You push up and you twist and it opens. So that's a legal one to use. If you push it, it won't open. And I think mostly, and you want to have something that's rated, and I think this one might be like 24 kilonewtons. It's more than 5,000 pounds or so. Everything that's for tree care, it's going to be more than 5,000 pounds. This is a different style. This is like an oval, and this is like almost a pear or off-shaped D. It's got a kilonewton rating also at 24, so for sure it's more than 5,000 pounds. Same thing, it has a couple actions to open it. You twist and then push in. You push up, twist, and then it locks. You can feel that it won't open. Here's a couple other pulleys. These pulleys are usually just used for tending your knots. This is right here, this little piece of rope is called a French pressic. It's an eye-to-eye French pressic. That's what you would use on a little bit more advanced climbing system. And this is just a old-fashioned split tail rope that you connect a carabiner to this, and then you tie your knot to the climbing line. So then you'd need a saddle, and arborist grade saddle is something you want to get. You want to get it something that some of the arborist supply companies, you can look them up online. You can see there's some big ones, like I always go to Bishop, that's in our area, Cheryl Tree, treestuff.com. I think there's there's just a lot out there. You don't want to go get something off of Amazon, and you don't want to buy something from somebody selling it, somebody you don't know. It's better that you get everything is rated and you get it from a reputable company for arborist supplies. So this is a tree saddle, and then here's some of the helmets. This Petzl is it has a suspension system in it, so it has vents that it can air. It actually is pretty nice. It has a rating on it also. I don't know if you can read that. Here you go. It meets the, I guess, ANSI Z89 point something. I can't see what it is. Anyhow, it's a class 2, and it's a type 2 class C. It's not rated for electricity because it has holes. This is the same thing, same style. It has vents, so it can't be, you don't want to use it around electricity. This one has a foam kind of instead of a suspension, there's foam. You want to make sure that if it ever gets, you ever take you get hit by a branch or something, it could crack the foam, so that would have to be like changed out. Same kind of thing. If you take a hit on something like this, you got to inspect it, make sure that it didn't get damaged, and if it did, you definitely want to switch it out. So here's a couple of styles of lanyards. This is a style that it has a English pressic in it, and so you wrap it around tree and use it. This also has a couple of double locking snaps. This is another style of a lanyard that kind of made up. It has double locking. It has a pressic, a pressic with a pulley to tend your slack out. You can put another carabiner on the end, and you could have like 3 options to connect to. Right now with this, it's not. This is just to kind of hold them onto my belt, and I'm using it as a long lanyard. This is something called a friction saver. So if you've got a rough bark tree, these are really good, or a thin bark tree, you would install this in in the tree, and what happened is you put your rope in this, and that's would be your main tie-in point. It makes it a lot easier to move. Having gloves help. Leather, or I like these style where it's like cloth and some rubber on them. Gloves are optional, not really a requirement, but they make the job easier. So here's a couple of different types of rope. This one's a 12 strand rope. I think it's a Samson True Blue. So 12 strand. It doesn't have a core. It's kind of a softer rope. Pretty nice. I believe it's about 1/2 inch. These are rated more than 5,000 pounds. They're you know, definitely arborist grade, something you want to have. This other one here is a Blue Streak. So the Blue Streak, I think it's rated more than like 7,000 pounds tensile strength, but 16 strand. It's a really good rope. These are different because they do have a core. So I got an old piece of rope. This is a smaller size rope, but it's still an arborist grade rope. So nowadays the way they're making the ropes is, you can see there's like a core inside, and then they have a sheath. Now both of them are strength, but it's almost like a rope in a rope. So this is just a slight piece. Those are some of the things that you need. For getting into the tree, there's something called a shot bag. So this is what you want to do is, if you're going to throw high into the tree, you get a shot bag like this, and a little a zip line. I can't remember. This is like a Zing It, I think, but it's for your shot bag. It's really lightweight. So what you do is, with this, you throw it high, like maybe 50-60 feet up into the tree. You connect your rope to this, and then you can install your rope. This is to go pretty high. Also, some of the other things you need. A good pair of work boots. It's important. Something with a steel toe or a composite toe. That's important, so you don't drop a log and break your foot. Some of the other gear. So full equipment. Having a a saw, and then a pole pruner and a pole saw. That's kind of will get you started. Hey, another thing that I forgot to mention was safety glasses. And on here, I don't know if you could see it, there's a label ANSI Z87. It's important to have that certification on it. You can get them anywhere. They're not very expensive. And even on the inside, you'll find the number here. If the bag doesn't have it, you want to make sure that it has an ANSI Z87 on it. Alright, so Noah, it's important that on tree equipment, the gear that you're going to use, you want to inspect it every time that you're going to use it, just before you use it. So what I'll do is I'll show you how to inspect, say, like this carabiner, the clip, the saddle, the hat, the helmet, I mean, a split tail, and some of the rope. Probably won't do the whole rope, but I'll give you an idea of what I'm going to look for and what you should look for just before you're going to climb. So on a carabiner, what you want to do, this is pretty new, so it's not really messed up, but you would want to look for any kind of like nicks, maybe hairline fractures around this carabiner. Just make sure that it was good. You want to make sure that it was rated, and for sure you would wanted to buy it at a arborist grade store. You want to check the mechanism. You'll let it go, you'll open it and let it go and make sure it locks. If you were to like let this go and it would stay where it would stay open, like it wouldn't twist, it needs to be, you need to do something, maybe clean it, or maybe even take it out of service if it wasn't working properly. The way to do it is that you look for any kind of bent or hairline fractures. Kind of simple to see anything that's wrong with it. And the clip, you would do the same type of thing, except for on this, you'd want to make sure that there's no excessive wear. Like if you would see like a big, maybe a notch taken out of this or something, or it looks like it was starting to become deformed, that would be probably a time that you'd probably want to switch it out. But as long as it looks all intact, you want to make sure the locking mechanism works. So you would push down, make sure that once you let it go, it locks. You want to make sure that this gate This little piece, everything in here looks like it's not broken, damaged, bent, no hairline fractures. You want it to look good. So these two both look good. So in the helmet here, you already know that you would have gotten something that's ANSI approved. So, you know, we won't even think about that, because when you buy it, that's what you're going to look for. When you're inspecting a helmet, you want to push it, and you're going to hear and listen. If you hear cracks or if you see like white areas, then you know that this is getting kind of old. You're going to check the suspension on this type of a helmet. You'll look inside, make sure the suspension is good, nothing's tore or ripped, it's all in good condition. If you see frays or rips, any kind of tears, then you would take it out of service. Chin strap included. You want to make sure the chin strap looks good. You want to make sure that when you lock it, it locks, right? And then you can open it. So that's kind of how you would inspect that. So a saddle, when you're going to your saddle, you want to, I'll start say like at the front D's. So these are all connecting points. Now I want to make sure that any of these aren't ripped or tore. All the stitching looks good. There's nothing ripped or tore. So I'm going to go, I'll start like say with this ring here, and I'm going to look at it, make sure that there's no rips or tears, and I'll start following it through, looking at all these. I'm going to look at all this stitching here, make sure that in the front and the back that it's all good. This is not ripped or tore. There's no puffs, or it's not glazed in any way. Maybe something got it, or maybe got nicked. We don't want to see any of that. I'll go to this bridge. I might use this ring, so I want to make sure that this bridge is all intact. Same kind of thing. I'm going to look on both sides, make sure there's no rips or tears, and even where it connects right here, follow all this stitching here, make sure it looks good. The clip to clip my waist in, I want to make sure that it locks and it opens. Also these lower eyes here, I can use these to clip in. I want to make sure all the stitching's good. For the leg straps, I want to make sure all this looks good, and the way I clip it in, I want to make sure that that mechanism works. Okay, it secures, and then you open it where it's connected here. Make sure there's no rips, tears. All of this looks good. All the stitching that connects the strap, this good strap, we want to make sure all of this is not rip or tore, not coming apart in any way. And I'm going to follow it around, go to the back. The D-rings, these are what you connect your lanyard to. So you want to make sure that these D's don't have nicks or they're extra wore or anything like that. You want it to look pristine. Where they're connected, you want to look at this and make sure that these stitches are all good and that they're not rip or tore. There's no stitches that are loose. You'll follow it straight through here. And this right here, you want to make sure that this is still working good order. There's no loose stitches. This is all in good condition. You're going to follow it through. You'll look at your strap. This is a strap that kind of holds a leg up, but it's still important that it's in good shape. You don't want it to be all like loose and or maybe tore. These little rings, they're not really for stability or anything, but it's nice to have them. It's not really a safety thing, but you want to make sure that all these look like they're good, just in case you want to put a saw or something. You can continue to follow the stitches. Make sure that it's all good. And I would go to the next leg. Do the same thing, follow it through. Look at the strap. Make sure this, I'm looking for the same situation. I want to make sure that nothing is rip or tore, and I'm going to give it a test. Make sure that it locks. It locks, and then you can unlock it. Follow it to the next D-ring. So we're going to make sure that this D-ring is still in good condition, no hairline fractures, or it's not bent or shaped funny. So basically that was an inspection of a saddle. Make sure that all the stitching here is in good shape. You don't want a saddle to be altered in any way. Like you wouldn't get it and cut it and make it shorter. That's not something you would do. You buy a saddle that's going to fit you. You don't alter it. Something that alters, it's not probably rated after that. I mean, you kind of ruin the rating. If you see chemical like dark, say something's really dark and it's kind of crunchy, you know, you want this to be pliable. You don't want to hear like crunch, 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 because that could be that the chemical, you know, you've got chemical damage. So make sure that they're all in good shape. Okay, Noah, so now I'll inspect a split tail. So on the split tail, this has a spliced eye, so I want to make sure that the eye is in good condition. I'm going to look at it, make sure there's no rips or tears. I'm going to look at the outer cover. I want to make sure that this area here is in still good condition. I'm going to go through the rope. I'm going to fill it. I'm going to fill for any kind of hourglass or flattened shapes. I'm going to look for puffs or maybe slices in the rope. And as long as it looks good, you know, the rope is in good condition, I might look for glazing. You know, having this being the thing that you're going to have a friction hitch on, it could get glazed. So we'll look for that. If there's a darkened area, it might be chemical damage. We want to make sure that there's no chemical. If I see a darkened area, I might want to get in that area and try to listen to see that there's no cracking, because that could mean that the rope is in bad shape. We'll do it all the way to the end. Look at the end. This is melted and it's pretty good. We don't want to have the end of this in a puff. You want to have it in good shape, melted or even taped or whipped. Anyhow, this actually looks like it's good to go. The next thing I'll inspect is the lanyard. Same thing as with the split tail, it's rope, so I'd look at the same kind of thing when I do that. So the clip is a double locking clip. Check to make sure that it locks. And I'll look at the clip, make sure the mechanism's not bent. There's nothing that's going to stop it from closing and opening. I'm going to look at the hook, make sure that there's no more areas, no cracks or, you know, bent areas. I'll look at the ring where it's connected. Make sure that that ring is in good shape. There's no bends or even hairline fractures and none of that. Then I would do the rope. So I'll inspect it the same way. I'm going to look for the same thing. Glazing, hourglass, puffs. When I get to where this English pressic is, make sure the stitches are all good and they look great. They're all in good condition. All this fills in order. Even this pressic looks good. Usually you won't have much friction here because it's a lanyard. You don't run. I'll follow it through, looking for the same thing: chemical, hourglass, puffs, slices, anything inside material. I'll get to the stitching, make sure that it looks good. This one still has a rating on it, so that's still in order. This end has a thimble, and the thimble looks good. That means for sure the rope is in good condition on the inside. This rope all looks good. I'll look at the connecting point to the rope, this ring, make sure there's no wears or dent or bent. It looks good. I'll check the locking mechanism, and it looks good. Go to the hook, make sure that there's no bent areas or cracks, no hairline fractures. It all looks good. So lanyard and split tail are complete. I'm ready to go with that. Here's the climbing line. So this, what I was explaining, is if this one was whipped, I whip it and I actually glued it. This is a good way to keep the ends. You want to make sure that there's never pus. So and then I would inspect it in the same way. Two fingers or your whole hand, you pull, and you're looking for all the same things: any glazing, puffs or nicks, maybe an hourglass or a flat part inside the rope. And you would inspect your entire rope. You go all the way to the end, and just make sure that there's nothing. You can do it actually pretty quick. You're just looking to make sure that there's no damage or there's nothing that's going to make you feel like you're going to fall. Alright, so Noah, if you can give me an inspection of that clip and let me know when you're done and set it on the table.
Alright, so the first thing that you should look for is a grade or a rating. If there's no rating, at least, 5,000 pounds,
right,
then you should get it if there's no rating. And then you're going to check the locking mechanism. It should be double action, so if you're going to check by pressing on the opening or the gate of the clip, and then you're going to test it by opening it and letting it snap shut, and then testing it again. If it snaps shut and everything's fine, then you should be good to go. Then you're going to check the loops. If there's no nicks or hairline fractures, then you should be fine. You're going to make sure that everything's just intact and then kind of like smooth throughout the whole entire thing. And then you're going to check this side as well. Make sure there's no nicks, no hairline fractures, and just make sure everything's intact. And then after that, you should be fine, good to go with the clip.
Okay,
That's
cool.
it.
How about that carabiner?
So the carabiner, you're going to do the same thing you did with the clip. You're going to make sure that it does have a rating. They say over 5,000 pounds, same thing with the carabiner, or anything in tree climbing. And then you're just going to check for hairline cracks, any nicks, or anything within that avenue. And then you're going to then you're going to check the double locking system. It needs to be double action. So twist, this one's a pull up, twist, and then pull out. And then you're going to make sure by letting go. And if it closes and clicks, then you should be fine. So test it again, make sure it closes, and then click on it, make sure it doesn't open, and that should be what you should look for in a carabiner.
Alright, cool. Noah, can you give me an inspection of the helmet?
Alright, so the first thing that you should look for, I would say, is any like fractures or like any like hairline punctures or anything like that. And then you're going to look at the suspension to see if there's any tears or puffs or anything like that, and check all the stitching to make sure it's all good and fine. And then I would also make sure to test the clip to make sure it's secure. Good. You check all this, make sure all the stitching is good, and make sure it's not going to slip off while you're climbing. Another thing you would want to do is to test it by squeezing it, making sure you're not hearing any cracks or any crackles, to make sure the helmet's secure. I mean, if branches to hit you in the head or anything like that, then that would be very detrimental to the climbing. So yeah, that should be about it. And also, when you're squeezing it, you also want to make sure that you're not getting any white spots or any thinning areas, because that would also mean that your helmet's either getting old or it was malfunctioned or not good in the first place. So that is how you inspect the helmet.
Cool. Okay, Noah, so can you give me an inspection of the saddle? I want to hear everything that you're going to look for, and when you're complete, let me know.
Alright, so one of the first things I'm going to check for is any like fraying or like stitch damage around the whole entire saddle. So I'll start around one of the loops here, and then kind of work around I'll do also both sides. So I'll work around here, see if there's any stitch damage, kind of like work along the inside, see if there's any poofs, any stitching or chemical damage, if there's any around the stitches or any of the the tens in here. So go around the whole entire inside, and then check the loops, see if there's any frays or poofs, and then I go around the outside edge, and then I would also check all the stitches, and then just make sure each and every single one of them are intact, and then none of them are gonna snap, and all the weight of a 200-pound man or something is not gonna break the stitching. So you also have to keep that in mind too. So also checking the back, all the stitching, making sure that's all intact, and then you go around the edges, all the stitching, making sure everything's not frayed, no poofs or anything of that caliber. All the stitching on the back, that end, and then also the back of this end, and the back of each of the leg pads. Making sure everything's intact, no stitching, no poofs. Like I said, chemical damage as well. And then I'll start checking some of the metal parts of the D-rings. So making sure that none of them, or even the pieces that support it as well, making sure those are intact and no poofs, no stitch damage. Also with the rings, making sure they don't have any hairline fractures or nicks. Also moving on to the other D-rings and loops and stuff like that, making sure they don't have any nicks, hairline fractures, almost like we did with the Carabiners. Making sure that they are all intact. Move my way to this one. It's looking good. These things, as you said, they're too important, but they're necessary to have if you are going to put equipment on it. So I would also check if these are intact. None of them have any cracks or anything of that caliber. So both of them look pretty good. And then I would move on to the clips, and then make sure none of them are loose or broken or cracked in any way, and they snap into place. So I test this out, looking at it. I'd also like inspect, make sure everything's looking good, nothing's cracked, make sure it all snaps into place, and then your body weight's going to be on this, so you don't want to, if you're pulling it, you should be fine. And also checking the other clips, and then looking at the clips, no hairline fractures, no nothing. Everything is looking intact, so I'll clip it in. I want to hear it snap, and then pull that to make sure everything is working. And there's one more right here, the crotch, I believe. Oh, around the other. Okay. Yeah. Well. Yeah. And then just checking the clip, make sure the hairline fraction is good, and then no cracks or anything like that. Making sure everything looks intact. Clip it, tug, make sure nothing's wrong with it, and then yeah, that should be how you inspect a saddle.
Okay, Noah, if you would inspect that split tail.
Alright, so one of the first things you want to do is just make sure the eye is intact and the stitching looks good. Then you're going to move on to checking if there's any poofs, and then you're going to get your hand, either a couple fingers or so, and then roll along the rope to make sure that there's no cave-ins, to make sure that it's not hourglassing in any shape or form, that the stitches all look fine, and that you're not getting any black marks. But if there's a black mark, you'd also want to make sure that it's not chemical damage, or there's no internal damage, or you could listen to it to make sure it's not crackling or anything like that, to make sure that the rope is not in bad shape. So you'd go along the whole entire thing. You have to make sure you have to go along the whole entire thing, because one little nick or one little whatever you call damage could cause great detriment to your climb. And then you also want to make sure that there's no poofs or like any fraying at the end. Make sure it's either like glued or whipped, and then make sure it's all intact at the end, making sure that this is not going to come undone or cause a greater and just it keeps the lifespan of the rope a lot longer. And then also, here we go.
Lanyard. All right. Let me see.
So for lanyard, you also want to do the same thing we did with the clips. You should also make sure that they are graded and rated, and then that the system is locked, and unless you use it, there's double action, so you click it, snap into place, make sure it does it, make sure there's no hairline fractures or any nicks or anything like that that's going to be getting in your way. And then also make sure that this is all good, no hairline fractures, no nicks, nothing of that caliber. And then you're going to go around, same thing we did with the split tail. You're going to go with your hand around the edge, making sure there's no hourglassing, none of the cave-ins or dark spots. But if there is, always make sure to listen to it, make sure there's no crackling, no chemical damage or anything like that, because that could be very bad in the case that you're gonna be climbing. And then you're gonna check the English pressure, right? English
yes,
pressure.
you got it.
And then making sure that there's no poofs or anything like any fractures or tears or any fraying along that, because that would be bad. And then also go along the edge, keep looking, and check the stitching. It looks good and intact. The rating is still there, so rated lanyard as well. And then you're gonna check the thimble, making sure that is good. There's like no nicks, nothing along like that. It's good. So that kind of seals that the internal part of the rope is still intact. And then you're gonna also check this one, same thing we did with the other one, making sure the double locking system is still there, and then also checking to see if it's snapping in place. Double action works just fine, and then make sure there's no nicks or hairline fractures. Same thing with this side, and then that should conclude the inspection for the lanyard and split tail.
Good job. Okay, so Noah, I want you to inspect the rope. Normally you got to inspect the whole rope, but for now, just give me about 8 feet of it, and explain everything that you're going to look for as you're doing it.
All right. So when it comes to the rope, you're going to make sure to check the end to make sure it's either whipped or glued or anything like that, to make sure it doesn't fray or rip or tear and preserve the lifeline of the rope. Also, you're going to do the same thing you did with the split tail and the lanyard. You're going to get your fingers and then roll it along the edge of the rope, making sure to check for the same things, any poofs, tears or frays. Make sure there's no chemical damage or anything of that in that line. But if you do come up with one, make sure that you put your ear up to it. Make sure there's no crackling or anything like that. If there is, you probably want to get rid of that rope and move on to another one, either too old or is malfunctioning. And then you're just going to test it. Also make sure you want to get it graded, and making sure it's graded, buying it from a reliable source, not some yard sale or anything like that. And then yes, that's pretty much 8 feet.
Yeah, okay, good job.
Yeah, that's good. Oh no, and also what is it? Yeah, make sure you inspect everything every time you're about to climb. Don't do anything, don't miss any of those steps, because that could be detrimental to your climb. So you have to make sure you do it every single day.
Cool. You're good. You did good. There's a couple things that you could, know too, that if you were inspecting it and say it was close to the end of the line, instead of taking a whole rope, you could cut a piece of the line off, and then all you have to do is like whip it. And you want to remember to look for glazing.
Glazing. So yeah, just in case if there's any friction that can melt your rope. So yeah, glazing is another one that you'd also want to check with all the other ones.
Awesome.
So yeah.
Good job. So Noah, we went over some of the equipment that we need for tree climbing, the basic stuff, and we also did some inspection of the gear, and it's important. Inspection's important because you don't want to be up in a tree and find that maybe something's damaged and you can get hurt. So yeah, that's really important. You want to make sure that anytime you're going to buy any arborist gear, you're going to get it from a reputable company, and it's going to be arborist grade stuff. You want to make sure you don't buy stuff from a secondhand store or maybe Amazon. You just want to make sure that you're going to get it in the proper place. Also, so we did the gear and the inspection. So the next thing that we're going to do, we'll work on a tree site inspection. So it'll be kind of cool just to what you're going to look for before you climb a tree, any of the risks, and what you'll look for to dib a tree safe to climb. All right, so that's what we're going to work on next.